Alrighty. So we're gonna make some eclairs and some cream puffs today. The dough that we're gonna make is kind of a wet dough. It's called pastry. It's a French type of dough, so it is really intimidating to a lot of people because they think it's really complicated. But I promise you, once you're like, watch this, if you can like whisk for a little bit, then you're gonna be able to do this, no problem. So I'll be using a whisk just to kind of make it a little easier. If you want to use a mixer, you can, or if you want to use a hand mixer, you can do that too, especially if your arm gets tired after a little while. You're more than welcome to use like a little hand mixer. I'll show you and tell you when and everything. So we'll get started, and essentially we're kind of going to have to do this in 3 parts. So the first one will be making the pastry dough, then we'll get that in the oven, then we'll make the pastry cream, then we'll get that all completed, get that in the fridge to cool, and then our dough should be pretty much done by then. We'll kind of let them kind of cool. Hopefully we'll time everything right, and then we'll make the ganache at the end to dip everything in after we pipe it into there. So let's get started. Let me switch my camera.
Preheat our ovens.
Yes, so the first thing you're going to want to do is preheat your oven to 425.
Why don't I just turn ours up to that?
Yeah. And Aaron's doing other things tonight, so I'm switching the camera on my own. So if it goes a little slower, I apologize. So the first thing you're going to need is just a little small pot. This seems really big, but it's not. It's just kind of close. So just a small pot is the first thing we're going to need, and we're going to put the first kind of group of ingredients in there. So first, we're going to need a ½ cup of water. So I'm going to grab that from the sink.
Sorry. You just watch
yes.
Things.
Question? You're muted, Lindsay.
Sorry. It's a ½ cup of water in like a relatively small saucepan?
Yep. Yeah, so I have not the smallest saucepan that I have, but like medium-ish. So all I have right now is a half a cup of water. Next, I have just whole milk here. If you don't have whole milk, if you're a family that, like we drink skim milk usually, 2% or anything like that is fine. I bought just a small little pint of this because I knew I was going to use it all up. But the fattiness of it makes a little bit of a difference, but it's not the end of the world if you have skim milk or 2% or something like that. So ½ cup of that into your pot. Next, we're going to take, so it's 8 tablespoons of butter, which is actually 1 stick. So if you get some that are like the half sticks or something, you'll essentially just need 8 tablespoons. It's just 1 full normal stick of unsalted butter. If you have salted, that's fine too, not the end of the world. But for baking, I normally use unsalted just because we want to control everything quite heavily when we're baking things. And then we'll need a teaspoon of sugar. So I have my little teaspoon here. Just make it easy so I don't have to pull out of my big container. I have this little pour. Teaspoon of sugar. And then a $1/4 teaspoon of salt, or it's just like a pinch. Just a little pinch. And we're going to put this on the stove on about medium-high heat. So let me switch my camera over. Cool. So I have it right here. So everything's just in there. I'm putting mine on like a 5 or so out of 6. Where essentially we're gonna get this to almost a boil. We don't want it to like actually be like a rolling boil. We just want it to kind of all melt down together. Then we're gonna add the flour to it. Then we're gonna add the eggs to it, but we're gonna kind of do it in stages. So first we want to get all of this kind of to come down. If you want, you can cut the butter into little pieces and it'll melt a little faster, but it's not that big of a deal. You're going to want either a wooden spatula, or I like the kind of like just rubber ones, we're going to get into that pastry really well, and we don't want it to be sticking. So make sure you have something that can do that. I wouldn't recommend metal on metal. It would kind of ruin your pans a little bit. So I'm just going to kind of break mine into smaller pieces. It's gonna come down. While I wait for that, I'm gonna measure out a cup of flour. I'm not adding anything to it yet, just measuring it out. So we have it ready. I just have my flour here. It's gonna be sitting to the side. I'll set it right here since my stove isn't hot.
Regular all-purpose flour?
Yep, it's just regular all-purpose flour. So I just had mine in a big, it's an old Costco container from like pretzels or something that we've been using for years. As I have a flour and a sugar and brown sugar. And so.
And Kevin, how many eclairs would this make?
It will make a decent amount, probably about a dozen. It depends on how big you make them. So like, we're gonna try to pipe ours about 4 inches long. So some people, if you want to like make them bigger, or if you're doing cream puffs, it'll do a kind of different sizes, but it should do about a dozen or so. We'll see how much it ends up being, but that's my rough estimate. Also, while we wait, I'm going to crack 4 eggs into a bowl. So I'll switch my camera over to this one. Grab a bowl out. So my bowl here. Just have normal, like large eggs from the store. So we want the full egg. For the pastry cream, we're going to want just the yolks, but for now, we're just going to want the whole egg. So I'm going to crack those and have them in a bowl ready. We have that all ready and off to the side. Just a tip for people that maybe haven't done this before or anything, but when you're cracking eggs, you never want to go directly into what you're making. So for example, I wouldn't crack an egg directly into my pan because you never know what's going to be on the inside. If you have a kind of underdeveloped or overdeveloped egg, sometimes it can be really gross and you have to throw out your entire mixture. So always when you're making egg stuff, crack them into something separate and then add them later. Just a little helpful hint. Switch back over here. Looking pretty good, starting to be pretty melty and coming together. Also just grabbing a whisk because I know I'm going to need it here in a little bit once I add the flour. So I'm just having that kind of on standby right now.
Kevin, as soon as it has melted, should we turn it off?
So we're going to want it to kind of simmer almost. So you don't want to turn it off. So not quite a boil, but we'll want it to be almost boiling. Once it does get there, we're going to add the flour all at once. We don't want to add it in stages. It will kind of mess it up a little bit. So we'll dump it all in at once it starts getting up there. Something we can also do while mine's still waiting, I'll switch it over. We can start kind of getting our piping bags a little bit ready. So I just have these little disposable piping bags here. I'll show you, these are the two tips that I like took a picture of and have. Either one will work for this. If you have it a little bit slightly different, that's perfectly fine. I'm going to use this one just for right now. So slide this down and it's almost there. So I'm just going to cut I know it's going to kind of come down to about right there and push it out. Cut the tip off of it. So I can see it's like not past the little grooves in mine. You don't want it to kind of go up too far, so then you lose that texture, but that's kind of where we're at. So I'm just going to set that to the side for the moment and switch back because I see my mixture is boiling. So you can't see it too much, but mine's bubbling a little bit, which is what we want.
Kevin, should we anticipate that that disposable pastry bag is going to hold the whole batch?
Yeah, it should hold pretty much all of it. If not, then we can we can do it in 2 batches. All right, so mine's at the point where I'm ready to add it. So I just have my full cup of flour. I'm just going to go straight into there all at once. I'm going to whisk that so it doesn't get super lumpy. You know, kind of thicken up, and this is where people get a little bit scared. So once I make sure it's kind of together, I'm going to stop and switch to the spatula. So it should be this like kind of very soft dough. It's not quite liquidy, but it's not like a solid like a pizza dough or bread dough. It should be very soft. So we're gonna kind of do this for about a minute or 2. We want to kind of cook the flour a little bit, but we don't want to like scorch anything. So we're just going to kind of keep this moving for about a minute or 2. We'll just keep this going. This helps develop some of the gluten in the flour. I'm just making sure mine's not sticking to any of the corners, and I'm kind of getting everything in there. It's starting to look pretty good. About 30 seconds or so. All right, mine's looking pretty good. So I'm going to take mine off the heat. You can leave your burner on for right now because we're going to be going back and forth. So I'm going to switch my camera here. This one. So this is kind of where I'm at right now. So I have my dough in a pot just off to the side here. So right now I'm going to kind of do this by hand. If you have a mixer, you're welcome to use like a hand mixer in this next part. If you have a stand mixer, you can transfer to your stand mixer and then add it all kind of one at a time. But it's not that big of a deal. So I'm just going to do it by hand. But if you want to use a hand mixer or a stand mixer, you can use that too. So we're going to add the eggs one at a time. So I'm just going to add one here and then mix it all around. Try not to get too much outside of your hand. We want to kind of do this really quick so we don't cook the egg, like have scrambled eggs mixed into it. We don't want that. So that's why like a hand or a stand mixer could work really nice for this, but I don't mind doing it by hand right now. So then I'm going to add my next egg. Again, moving pretty quickly so I don't cook my egg and have scrambled eggs mixed in. Switch to my whisk is getting a little wet, so. Right, 2 down, halfway there. The other egg. So you can see it a little better. Right, and last egg. Mine's pretty together, but I'm going to switch back to my spatula since I can see that it's getting into a little bit of the cracks that I can't reach. So, I'll switch back.
Kevin, I've got a question. If we had been using a hand mixer, do we just beat it until it's incorporated, or beat it? Is there no problem with overbeating?
You're going to want to do it till it's incorporated, and like 1 minute after that. I'll show you what it's supposed to look like here in just a minute, since I'm mixing it by hand. It should be like this. It should be kind of like a ribbon consistency when you pick it up. It should just kind of, it's hard to see since it's kind of close, but it should kind of come together pretty nicely. It shouldn't be too thick, but it shouldn't be watery or really runny either. So you don't want it to be like a thick bread dough. So you can see this is kind of, when I lift it up, it pulls a little bit, which is what we want. Almost there. And that's our dough. So you can see it's looking pretty smooth. It kind of pulls when you move it sideways like that. It kind of stretches a little bit. It doesn't just immediately fall apart. So that's where we're at. That's what we're looking for. Right now, you could cool this if you wanted, if you think it's going to be too hot for your hands, but I think it's should be okay. We've been mixing it for a while, especially if you use a hand mixer. It'll incorporate a lot more air.
Kevin?
Yes.
If the dough looks a little dry, more like cookie dough than ribbony like yours?
I would add a little bit more liquid. So add some more milk or a little more water.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, so that's what we're looking for. So now we're going to put it into our piping bags. So this can kind of scare some folks a little bit because piping bags are a little scary. I can show you a couple easy ways to do that. I'm turning my burner off because we don't need it at this moment. I'll need it in a few. So when you're piping or putting stuff into a piping bag, you can kind of do it in a couple ways. Let me try to raise this up a little bit. You can see a little better. The easiest way is just kind of hold it in your hand, but that can be a little scary sometimes. So I just took like a normal drinking glass, a tall one, put my piping bag down in here, and then I'm turning it inside out onto the glass. So that's what it looks like sideways. I just put the outside and kind of turned it inside. It's okay that it's a little crooked down there, that we'll fix that later, but this is a really easy way to put stuff into your piping bag and not trying to hold it and maneuver everything. Anybody have questions? Do you need to take a moment while you finish your stuff?
Kevin, we're using the tip with the multiple prongs, right?
Yeah, so this is the one I'm using. If you wanted to use this one, like the flat one, you can it will work just the same. It makes zero difference. Just make sure it's wide enough. So I'm using this one. It's a French star tip. It just has a little bit more than just like 6 or so. It just gives it a slightly different outside appearance, but again, it makes not that big of a difference one way or the other. So have it here on our glass. The reason we do this is because we don't want to fill it to the rim, because when we try to squeeze it, it's going to squirt at the top. And then this also gives us something to push down on by having it on the glass there. So I'm going to start with a little bit here on my spatula, and then just do it like that. So you see it's still clean on the outside, and I have that little edge to put stuff on. So I'm just going to push that down. Try not to get too many air bubbles in it, because then you get, when you're trying to pipe it later, it will squirt out an air bubble, and it can just ruin your flow. So you can kind of see here, I'm just like pushing it in. I'm going to probably have to do mine in 2 batches instead of just 1. If you have like reusable piping bags that are huge, feel free to fill it up if you are confident in it, but I'm just going to go right there. So I have about a little bit less than half of mine left, but that's okay. So I'm just going to pull mine out. So I'm just going to flip it back over here. So it has this seam here, so I'm just going to keep it on the seam. So you can kind of see this is what it looks like right now. I'm just going to try to always pinch right here up at the top of it. So this is how I like to do it. So I have it pinched, and then I just spin it a couple times, and then I get this little pinched part in between my thumb and my first finger. So I try to always keep this pinch so stuff doesn't squirt out the top, and then I can use my rest of my hand here to pipe. So that's how I like doing it. If you want, I would maybe start a little less, like you can see here, where it has like a max line. It makes it a little easier to control, but I've piped more than my fair share of things, so I'm a little comfortable with that. Next thing I have, I just have, this is just a sheet tray. You can, it's kind of hard to see because my camera. Let's see if I can move this to be a little higher up for you guys. Sorry, I'm like messing with the camera. I was like, oh, it should be fine how it's been, but now I'm realizing that you probably want it higher so you can see me piping the whole thing. You can see most of my pan now. So we're gonna, if you're like really worried about it, you're trying to measure things out really precisely, you can take a piece of parchment paper and draw straight lines on it. And so you make sure everything's piped out. I'll show you what that looks like. You can just take a piece of parchment paper here. I'm going to flip mine over because this is the side I want to use. And I just have like mine's like an Expo marker, but a Sharpie would work better, but I didn't see one. So I'm just drawing, we wanted about 4 inches, so I'm pretty sure that's 2 of these lines, 2 of these. And then you, like this one is nicely checkered for me. Yeah, I'll do one more. You want a little bit of space in between them. You don't want them right next to each other. They'll like kind of collide into one another. So I would say about 1 inch or 2 in between. If you don't have parchment paper, that's perfectly okay. Just kind of do the math in your head. So you can see it's not quite perfect. So you don't pipe directly onto this, flip it over, and then you have your little lines there. That's why I said a Sharpie would work a little nicer. I'm just going to do mine onto my fill pad here. Might as well use what I just used actually, so I'll just use that.
Kevin?
Yeah.
I saw one recipe that suggested dampening your parchment paper slightly before you pipe onto it. Do you ever do that? And if not, why?
I've never heard of dampening your parchment paper first. That's something I've never heard of. I could imagine that if it's a little damp, then it will kind of help it release, but I can't really think of a reason why it would do that, to be honest. Not something I've heard of before. So have my piping bag here. Again, I keep this pinched fairly tightly. If you're really worried about it, you can take a rubber band and do it several times over right here to ensure it doesn't come out. So if you wanted, you just kind of flip it multiple times over. It just adds some extra security if you're worried about it. It's not that big of a deal to me, but if you're new to piping, it's a good extra security. Then you don't have to pinch as hard, and you don't have your stuff coming out. All right. So to pipe it, I'm just going to turn it to face me because it's a little easier. You're going to just kind of start. You're going to want it about a 1/2 inch thick. And when you get to the end, I go backwards a little bit. So you get this little kind of, I don't know what kind of shape that would be, but it goes and then you just go backward really quickly. There it is. So you can kind of see there. If you're not quite as confident, you can always take a pair of scissors and just cut it at the end. That works perfectly well as well. So like that. And then again, I just go quickly the other direction and not squeezing, not putting any pressure, and that will kind of cut it off from itself. I think mine might have been a little close, so I'm just gonna kind of deviate from it a little bit because I think that will kind of come in. So again, just gonna go backwards. See, if you can see the difference between this one, where it just goes kind of flat, and then this one where it kind of drags a little more. I was squeezing a little too hard and I squeezed more out onto it. So it's not the end of the world, it just won't look quite as nice. So I'll do one more row of Eclairs. And then I'll show you for cream puffs because it's the exact same recipe, exact same dough. All you're going to do is pipe it slightly different.
Hey, Kev, if you're going to do cream puffs, how are you going to do those?
I'm going to show you in 1 second. Let me finish this row.
Oh, okay.
All right. So that's looking pretty good. I'm going to need to grab another sheet pan to do my cream puffs. So I'm pretty much out, so I'm just going to take this rubber band off. Put more in there. So I'm going to set these to the side for just a moment so we can get everything in the oven at the same time. Move one thing out of the way. So give me 1 second to get my sheet pan. So I have my sheet pan. This silpat's slightly too big, so I'll just keep that in mind so I don't go up on the edges too much. Just going to take my glass again, so I can put a little bit more dough in here to do the cream puffs. Again, you're going to do the same thing. You just kind of make it go around the outside of it. Pushing that in there and just kind of pushing down on it. So it, again, I don't want to create these big air pockets. And that's the last of my dough here. Again, gonna kind of flip it inside. We're gonna invert it. Once it's all down in here, Then I'm going to squeeze it. Just kind of keep doing this. It will kind of put some pressure and push it down. For the cream puffs, we're essentially just going to make like a swirl. So if you ever piped on the top of a cake, you're just going to kind of move sideways like that. So it just creates like a little dollop. I'm trying to just push mine down a little bit because I don't want to have like a point because I'll kind of burn a little bit. So again, so I'm just doing a little swirl on top of each other. And you can make these any size that you want. If you want little mini cream puffs, you can just have like little small ones. But since I don't want to have some things baked much quicker, of course, the bigger you do it, the longer it's going to take to bake. So you don't want to have a massive, because then they won't bake evenly. So I'm just going to do these. That's probably a little too close. As you can see here, they might rise into each other. So I'm going to move a little further away. I'm just kind of tapping down the little tip of it. Again, I don't want it to burn, so I have plenty of room left.
I'm curious, and you may not have already done this, but could you get these all prepped just like this and freeze this so that, I don't know, maybe there's no advantage to having a hot pastry anyway?
I don't know. I've never tried doing that before. I've never like tried freezing the raw dough. I feel like it would cause a little bit of issues just because it's, unless you'd have to thaw it like all the way so it doesn't have any kind of frozen bits, because since it's a really wet dough, you don't want it to have like frozen pieces because then the outside will cook a lot faster. So that's how mine are. Not super even, but that's kind of how it is. So we're going to put these in the oven. So yours should be up to 425 by now. We're going to put them in for 10 minutes on 425, and then we're going to drop the temp down to 325, and it's going to go for about 30 more minutes. So it's always, the cream puffs will cook a little faster. Possibly, we'll have to see how they go. So I'm just going to put them both in the oven and set a timer for 10 minutes and see how they're looking. Then we're going to drop the temp and go from there.
What is the temp you turn it down to, Kevin?
It's going to go from 425 to 325. So you can see here, setting my timer for 10 minutes. And we're off. So while that starts, I'm just going to kind of do a slight little cleanup so we can start making the pastry cream. So I'm just going to use the same pot that I did before. So I'm just going to give that the pot a quick wash and be back in a second.
Lindsay, did you get your dough thinned out a bit? Or thickened up? Which was it?
We needed to thin it, and we added more whole milk.
Okay, I'm curious to see how mine turn out because mine, as soon as I put it in the pastry bag, the pastry bag was kind of oozing at the tip. So I hope it wasn't too thin.
You go to the doctor about that.
All right. So I'll give people another minute or so to get their, get either their cream puffs and eclairs into the oven, or if they're going to wash their pots, then that's fine too. So I'll just give people another minute and we'll get started on the pastry cream. Pastry cream is one of my absolute favorite things to eat, like as a sweet. It's essentially like a vanilla pudding. You can take the base before we add like cornstarch and stuff to it and put it in an ice cream machine and you have vanilla ice cream. You can take this and pipe it into pretty much anything. Donuts, it works really good. And of course, cream puffs or eclairs. Pastry cream is really, really good on cakes. It has a wide variety of uses and it's one of my absolute favorite things. So very versatile. So we'll get that going here in a minute. All right, so I have my pot here again. So I'm going to do 2 cups of whole milk. So this is just like a half cup measure I used before these. I only have 3 in here because it's a pint. Yep. 3. Then I'm going to use skim milk for the rest, just because I don't have any more.
Kevin, can you give us just 1 second? We're still
Yeah.
washing.
Not a problem. So I just have my milk in here right now.
How much milk was that? Sorry, Kevin.
It's 2 cups.
Thank you.
All right. So I'm just going to move this to the side for the moment. So just getting a cutting board ready. So I got my wet paper towel like I always do on there. So I just have a cutting board. The reason I'm doing this is because I have a vanilla bean that I'm going to cut and use. If you don't have a vanilla bean, that's a-okay. You can use like 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. So I grabbed that out too. So mine's just kind of vanilla extract I got in Mexico last year. Really delicious, but whatever vanilla you have, you'll want about 2 teaspoons or you're going to want 1 bean. I'm going to show you how to do it with the bean. Mine's a little dry, so it may not work as well. What you're going to do is we're going to kind of cut. Yeah, mine's just okay.
Are you just putting the vanilla in now?
Yep. Yeah. So if your vanilla's fresher than mine is, you're going to kind of cut it in half and then scrape all these little tiny seeds out of it. That's the delicious stuff. But mine is very dry, so really difficult to do that. Scrape some. We're going to be straining this anyway, so I'm just going to put these in to my pot because that's not really scraping really nicely like it should. So I'm just going to put that in there. And I'm also going to do a little bit of vanilla extract because I'm not getting all those seeds like I wanted. So I'm going to do that, and then I'll do like a teaspoon. Cool. We're going to want to whisk for this as well. So I'm just going to give that a quick whisk so it's slightly mixed together. We're going to put this on the stove if I don't spill all of it on myself here. Before I turn the heat, well, yeah, I can turn the heat on low or about medium right now. I'm just going to get some of the other ingredients ready so we have them all and we're not trying to measure things out as stuff is cooking. So the next thing we're going to need is 3/4 of a cup of sugar. So So I'm just gonna get a little bowl here. So I just have plain white sugar, same kind of container that I got from Costco. So I just have a 1/4 cup measure here, so I'm gonna do 3. Next, we're going to need a 1/4 cup of cornstarch, and you're going to mix that right into your sugar here. So I just need a 1/4 cup. And then just a pinch of salt. I'm just going to grab a fork and kind of mix this together. Doesn't have to be perfect. It's all going to go into the pot here in a few, but just to get it slightly perfect.
What, in addition to sugar, you have there? It's 3 cups of sugar, and then what else?
No, it's 3/4 cup.
Oh, that's, sorry, yeah, 3/4 cups.
3/4 cups, and then it's a 1/4 cup of cornstarch, and then a pinch of salt. So it's just those 3 ingredients. So 3/4 of a cup of sugar, 1/4 cup of cornstarch, and a pinch of salt. So I'm just setting that to the side. Grabbing one more, actually I'm gonna need 2 because egg yolks and egg whites. So I'm just grabbing 2 bowls here because it makes it a little easier for this, so you can kind of do it how you like. We're gonna need 4 egg yolks. If you have a little individual egg separator, feel free to use that. I just use the egg shells because I don't have one of those. So I'm just cracking mine in half. So essentially I'm just gonna get the whites to be on one side.
Hey, Kev, what
Yeah.
temp is our vanilla milk supposed to be at?
I just have mine on about medium right now, just because we're still doing stuff on the side. But we're eventually going to turn it up. So I'm just trying to get the egg yolks separated. So again, if you have a little separator, feel free to use that. But just do this the old-fashioned way. Oh no! So that one cracked a little bit. If they were planning on using the white for anything, or that would be ruined. But let's go back. Man, that one cracked the yolk as well. I'm doing a poor job at this.
Okay, my 10-minute timer went off. Do I just go ahead and turn it down?
Yep. Go ahead and, yeah, if your timer, mine has 2 seconds.
Sorry, Kevin, it's 4 yolks, and then what's with that other egg over there? A whole regular egg? No.
No, we just need 4 yolks. I've just been screwing up my separation, so I just need to.
Oh. Got it.
So we just need 4 yolks.
How long?
Okay.
This is just I need to put the whites in something, and I screwed them up a couple times, so I'm sorry.
And what temp do we turn it down to?
325.
Hey, Jason, you're right on it.
People keep remembering.
You have to teach her.
I'm not doing the best job of separating these eggs, but they're getting it. All right, so I have my 4 egg yolks. I don't need to.
If you can't, then we just put it in there.
Do we not need the whites?
I don't know.
You don't need the whites. If you did it perfectly and you have whites and you can make a nice egg white omelet, you could whip them up to do meringue. I screwed mine up, so I'm just gonna set them to the side and maybe I'll make some egg sandwiches in the morning because all we need is 4 yolks. So mine is 3 and 1 is broken. That's not that big of a deal. Last thing that we're gonna need is 4 tablespoons of butter. It's a half a stick. Let me get my cutting board back here. And this time you are going to want them to be cut into little pieces because we want this to go really quick when we need it. So I'm just going to cut mine into little pads here. Doesn't have to be perfect. It'll just make your life a little easier later. Cool. All right. So all of our stuff that we have is right here, just ready to go when we need it. So we're not trying to whisk our milk mixture and then separate eggs. We have everything. It's called mise en place, or everything in its place. It's a French term. For baking, it's really, really important to kind of get this done because baking is more of a science. Things have to go at the right time or they can get ruined. Cooking's a little more flexible, a little more fluid, so you don't have to do that too much. Don't forget to set your timer again for about 30 minutes. We're going to kind of keep an eye on it when it gets a little closer to the time, but about 30 minutes is the next time that we're going to need. So we switch back over to next bowl. Dexter heard him, whoever it was. So I'm going to turn my heat up just a little bit to about medium high. We don't want this to a boil. We want this to be just so you start seeing steam coming out of it. It's called scalding. So we want to give it a stir. We want it to just be like where it's kind of steaming milk or steaming air out of it. I'm almost there, so mine's getting fairly close, but I'll kind of show you what it looks like as best as I can. You can kind of see some of the little seeds in mine came out, so you can see these little dots, but we're going to put it through a sieve or a strainer anyway, so that's why I just kind of tossed them in there. I think my vanilla beans were a little old, so they didn't get as good of a seal. All right.
Guys, if you're trying to date an independent woman.
All right, so mine's almost there. So we're going to move to the next step while that does. So I'm going to switch back over here so you can see it. All I'm going to do is I'm going to put my egg yolks into my sugar, cornstarch, salt mixture. I'm going to kind of mix that as well as I can together. Got a little spatula. Get all of my yolky goodness in there. This will take a few to kind of get there. This essentially the reason that we're doing this step. A lot of times when you make pastry cream, you can run the risk of curdling your eggs or essentially having vanilla scrambled eggs, which nobody really likes. So when we do this, it essentially makes it a little harder for that to happen because we're adding the sugar and the cornstarch to it. So we're just gonna kind of.
So once again in your bowl, it's just the cornstarch, salt, and eggs, right?
Yep. So it's just 4 egg yolks, 3/4 cup of sugar, 1/4 cup of cornstarch, and a pinch of salt. So
the sugar is with that too?
Yep. So yeah, this is the sugar, cornstarch, and salt mixture we had, and then the 4 egg yolks. I'm just going to keep mixing that. It should get a little bit lighter in color because we're adding in air. Again, I just have like a regular fork. You'll want to get this, it's never going to be like completely smooth because it's granulated sugar. And that's okay, it's going to dissolve when we add it, but we want to get it fairly smooth. Yeah, that's where I'm at right now. Again, it's not, doesn't have to be like perfect, but you want it to be fairly mixed. And so that's where that's at. Switch back over to this one. So I don't think you can see it super well, but I'm starting to see steam coming off of my milk. It's not a rolling boil or anything. It's not bubbling it up at all. It's just starting to steam, and that's exactly what we want. If you get it too hot and when it starts boiling, then you can kind of burn the bottom of it. Then you have this kind of charred taste in your mouth, which isn't great. So just giving that a quick whisk. So you can see here, I'm just kind of moving it so I don't have to switch the camera. It should be kind of like this nice ribbon texture where it falls pretty easily. I'm trying to show you, but it's hard to tell.
If ours
so
is still really granulated, what do we do? Just keep stirring?
keep mixing. Yep. It'll eventually come together. So I'm just going to put mine into a slightly bigger bowl. So I'm just putting my egg mixture into a slightly bigger bowl just to make things easier, because we're going to add a little bit of our milk mixture into this, and then we're going to go back into the pot, and I just want to make sure I don't burn my hand. I could have let you know before I did this, so I apologize. Yeah, so it's going to be somewhat tough to show you this step because we're going to be going back and forth between a couple things. So this is my egg mixture that I just had. All I did was I took it from this smaller bowl and put it into a slightly bigger bowl. Make it a little easier for myself.
Have we added the butter yet?
We have not. The butter is going to come at the very end. So I have my egg mixture right here. Once my milk is kind of steaming, like I was just saying before, I have it right here. You can kind of see it a little better in this one. It's starting to steam up. Have your whisk ready in hand. This is a really important step so you don't have essentially scrambled eggs. So we're going to add a little bit into there and stir it really quickly, so nothing curdles. I'm going to add just a slight bit more. So I have probably about maybe a quarter or a third of my mixture in there. And then we're going to go back into the pot here. So essentially we did this so to make it as less likely as possible that we're going to curdle our eggs. So make sure you're whisking constantly. That is by far the most important step in this entire pastry cream process, is whisking it all the way. Just going to grab a spatula to get some of that goodness in there. And then we're just going to whisk. Now I'm going to move it back onto the stove. So let me switch cameras. All right. Now we have the fun job of literally just whisking until it comes and it's thicker. Just clean up a little bit. It doesn't have to be a very fast whisk, but you just want to make sure your mixture is moving. You don't want it to anything to kind of sit in one place, because that's when it burns. And eventually this is going to start getting thicker, and I'll show you what you're looking for. You'll want a spatula. This one's a black one. It'll show you really nicely how the consistency that we're looking for. It should only take another like 30 seconds, maybe a minute or two, to kind of start getting thicker. All that cornstarch that we had in and mixed in with the sugar will start reacting, and I'll start thickening our pastry cream up.
Hey, Kevin, what heat do you have this on?
Mine's on about 5 out of 6, so it's like medium high. And you don't want to go like crazy high on it, but we also don't want it to like just be on the lowest setting. So medium to medium high. I'm just going to grab my spatula here to do some tests. So I can see here that mine's, you can see mine's a little lumpy there, which isn't essentially my spatula or my whisk wasn't hitting the edges as well. And that's what our whisk will, or our sieve that we're going to strain into will prevent. So you can start seeing mine's getting a little thicker here, just kind of stirring it slowly, making sure I hit all the edges. So I'm just going to move mine off the heat so I can show you what it looks like. So yeah. Mine's starting to get pretty nice and thick here. So here on my spatula, if you like take it out and then you run your finger down it, it shouldn't come together. That's called nappe, N-A-P-E. That's the stage that we're looking for. It should almost look like a hot pudding, for lack of a better term. So I'm going to switch my cameras back here so I can show you. So I just have another bowl here and then my strainer. And then we're going to push this all through the strainer because we want to get it very smooth. So I'm just going to pour it all into here because I have a fairly big one. If you have a smaller strainer, then just do it a little at a time. So then I'm just going to lift it out and then just kind of stir this around so any of the smooth bits can go through, but any of the chunks can stay in. Don't push it down too much. Don't like force things through there because then you can get some like weird lumpy bits and you don't want that. So just kind of stir softly. Your creamy smooth stuff will fall through and then you can see like my vanilla bean bits and then there's just some like chunks of stuff like right here. You can see it. We don't want to push that through. That's kind of the whole point of the strainer. So just doing some soft little passes through. I always like to get my spatula really clean so I don't have anything in there and then just go on the bottom because all of that is good stuff. It just stuck to the bottom. And there is that. One last thing to do is add our butter.
Kevin?
So, yes.
Real quick, if our buttercream doesn't, it's not thickening. If it's not thickening, what would you recommend?
Just keep it on the stove and it'll thicken.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. So I just added my 4 tablespoons of butter to this, and I'm just giving it a good stir. Making sure it's all melted and it come through. You should have a really nice, smooth consistency. It should pour really nicely. It may seem kind of thin right now, and that's okay. Once it cools, it will thicken up quite a bit, and you'll have. If you just really wanted to eat this by itself, it's actually an excellent like vanilla pudding. So if you have some picky kids that don't like eating stuff, they like vanilla pudding, this is a really good vanilla pudding that you could give them. So that's that. What I'm going to do is take some plastic wrap and I'm going to put it on the surface of it so it doesn't get a weird skin and then pop it in the fridge.
Hey, Kevin.
Yes.
We missed the part with the butter.
Yeah. So once you have it all strained and you're in your bowl, just add it in there and stir it till it's all melted.
Okay.
I'm just going to get a little more than I need because again, I don't want to have it tight on here. I want it to be touching the surface because that will prevent any weird skins from forming on it, which we don't want because it gives it a really unpleasant texture. So I'm just pushing this down touch the top of it. Don't worry, it'll come out clean later. May get a little bit on there, but it's not a big deal. So once you have it like that, we're gonna put it in the fridge. So I'm just gonna do a little bit of tidying up here. Take some of my bowls.
So Kevin, if you're a hippie and you don't own saran wrap,
Yes.
something else you could use.
What do you have? Do you have like wax paper or any kind of thing?
Yeah, I have foil. I have like beeswax cloth, which is hot. It's hot though, so I don't really want to use that.
Yeah, I would probably do foil.
Okay.
It's not that big of a deal. When you take it out of the fridge, you might see a little bit of a skin on it. It's not the end of the world, especially since we're going to be piping it into something. If you're just going to eat it straight, I would say like maybe take that off, but I think you'll be perfectly fine.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
About how long should it take to thicken? Because it's still not thickening.
Still isn't thickening. So you have everything except for the butter in there. So you have your egg yolk, your sugar, cornstarch,
Egg, salt.
Is your stove on?
Say what?
Is your stove on?
Yeah.
Okay, just wanted to check.
That medium thickening at the bottom, but not across the spoon.
Okay, so you're gonna make sure you like mix it a little faster, because if it's thickening at the bottom and not the top, then you need to mix it a little faster because it's not kind of cooking all the way through. Taking my timer, I have about 12 minutes left on my timer. Starting to look pretty good. You don't want to open up your oven too much when you're baking. The less often, the better. But I know it's kind of hard when you want to check on them and see how they are. So I think the timer is going to be working pretty well. So we have about 12 minutes. What questions do people have as we're in this little bit of a downtime? I know some people are still getting theirs cooked, so I want to make sure everybody is feeling good.
As soon as it coats, put it in the bowl, add the butter.
Yep, put it in the bowl with the strainer, like go through your strainer into a bowl. And then you're going to add your butter and mix it.
Do we still do the strainer if we didn't do the vanilla bean?
Yes, because especially if you're just cooking at the bottom, you might get these lumps. And then that's the sieve will make sure it's very smooth and you have this really nice texture. One of my chefs at school said baking and pastry is all about selling air. We're just flavoring air and selling it. So when we're whipping air into stuff, that's kind of what we're doing. So our pastry is just like flavored air. Our butter or our pastry cream will be like that. Meringues especially are like that. But that was one of the things they told us, and I always thought it was kind of funny.
Can you
And how do you know when your cream puffs or whatever are done? 'Cause
So
mine
I
are
will. You said yours are burned?
brown.
So they'll look golden brown, and that's how they're supposed to be. But we want to make sure the inside is cooked too. So I have like 10 minutes left on my timer, so I have a feeling that yours is probably pretty close to my timer. So I know they're not ready yet, just based on mine. We want to make sure the inside is cooked. If it's not, it's going to be really chewy. So when we take them out, we're going to kind of tap them, and we're going to make sure they sound hollow. That's the sound that we're looking for.
My oven runs really hot, and I had my boyfriend try them, and they're hollow in the middle. My
Okay.
taste
Say,
is good.
Yeah.
I don't know where. Oh, shit. Well,
Yeah. So if you know your oven runs a little hotter and they're looking good, then that's perfect. I looked at mine. I might give mine a little turn them. I'll kind of show you. Hopefully they don't deflate on me. So let me switch. This is what mine look like. I still think they need a little bit of time. So I can feel them. They're feeling a little. So I'm going to give mine a few more minutes. My little cream puffs here, you can see they're a lot lighter. They're puffing up really nicely though. So.
Kevin, there's a little chicken waving at you.
Let me switch my camera back here. All right. I'm not going to start the ganache right now just because we want it to be really nice and liquidy when we do all of the stuff for the cream puffs. So we have a little bit of downtime, which I kind of was expecting with any kind of baking thing. You're going to do all your stuff and then let it sit. So I have like 8 minutes on my timer. So we have a little bit of time. How's everybody looking so far?
Still thickening.
So
So I can show you mine. Mine are very brown.
Let me see.
So I can talk so it actually shows my video, but
Let me turn off my spotlight. So there we go.
so they're all hollow in the middle.
Okay. Yeah, yours are looking pretty good. So you can leave them out. And again, this is where I was saying earlier when people asked, how do you know when they're done or how long should we do them? It all depends on how big you made them. So I think my cream puffs are a little bigger. So it just depends on how thick you pipe them and all of that. So just keep an eye on them and see how they're doing.
Kyle, I wonder, did you actually put in a 1/4 cup of cornstarch?
Yeah, I measured it out ahead of time.
Wow, because mine went from runny to pudding thick that quick.
Yeah, it goes really, really quickly. What is, can you show me your style? So yeah, I can see it thickening at the bottom. Why don't you stir a little, like harder, a little thicker, like try to get everything all mixed together.
Hi, Uncle Kevin.
Hello.
Can he see you?
Here we go.
Now we can see you, Annie.
Hi.
Bye.
Hi, bye.
So Kevin, our pastries are not really like expanding. They are still like, they're like almost cooked, but they are still very like skinny. They do not look like yours.
Okay.
Maybe
So
like not mix them enough, or
yeah, that was what I was going to suggest is they maybe didn't get enough like air whipped into them when you were whisking it. Turn my notifications off.
Heather, the same thing's kind of happening to mine. They're just not a nice, generous eclair like I was hoping. They're kind of, I don't know, little. Yeah, mine look like that.
Yeah, it's all about whipping that, like kind of mixing them at the beginning. You don't want to go too far of like mixing them because then you kind of whip the air out of them. But you don't want to just like barely stir together. It's one of those where you want to have a good texture.
I want to show you what happened to our household for Missy's very strong mixing.
Oh no!
Spatula needs to be attached and is now. That's also the only spatula we have, so we've
Oh
switched.
no!
We're okay.
I've had that happen to me many, many times, especially with my cheap little like IKEA ones. I have 0 of those left because I've snapped them all too much.
Kevin, when you take them out, do they need to be on a cooling rack?
Yeah, you can put them on a cooling rack. They don't have to, but they'll kind of expedite the process. I need to find where my cooling rack went. Aaron's been using it for 9.
Okay, you think this is good?
Let me see. Yeah, that's looking really good.
So I can take it out?
Yep, take it off. Here. Do you know where the cooling rack is? The cooling rack? Right. Files view right now. Good. All right, so my timer has about 3 minutes left. Take a look again. Yeah, I know my cream puffs are going to need a few more, but I'm going to check my other eclairs. My video up here. All right, so this is how mine are looking. Oh, too far that way. So this is what they are. So be careful if you're going to pick them up, especially if they're right out of the oven. So if you tap it, it should sound pretty hollow. So I'll try to be quiet and see if you can hear it. It's more of a feel too. So you want them to be hollow. So that just means that the inside is all cooked. So again, I'm just taking it at the bottom and just kind of tapping it to see how they sound. Yeah, so that's pretty good for those. So I'm just going to take them, put them on the cooling rack. Yeah, so this is how mine are looking there. Again, I have a few minutes left on my timer for the cream puffs. You might be able to hear those a little nicer since they're a little taller to see how they sound if they're hollow still. How's everybody's stuff coming? Are you checking your cream puffs, or is your pastry cream in the fridge already? Where are people at?
We're done. Everything's done.
I have a minute and a half left on my timer.
Same here.
Will I realistically use this?
When we want to fill these, if you have a piping tip that has like a really small hole, that's a little longer, so this one's a little longer than a normal one, it'll make your life a little easier. If you don't, you can kind of just stick your bag right into it and it'll work. It may not be as effective, but this is what I'm going to use. It's a number 800. Piping tips are pretty universally the same number system. You might have the exact same diameter here, but it's a little shorter. I mean, I have so many piping tips. Between Aaron and my baking kit from school, like we have just all of the piping tips that you could ever want, just bags on bags of piping tips. So another one's probably the same. Yeah, it's an 801, which is a little wider. So you just want something that's fairly thin, but not like a needle hole, because then you're going to have a hard time piping it out. But you don't want it as wide as like what you would have had for your eclairs. So my timer went off. I'm just going to check my.
Is it gonna be too big?
I'm trying to let me find your video. Let me turn my spotlight off. That might be a little big, Cindy.
Okay, I don't want it oozing out too fast.
Kyle, I can kind of see yours. It has the little cuts in it, so that's essentially like a leaf tip. If you stick it far enough in there, it will probably work, but you just might have to be careful.
What number were you using?
The one that I have is an 800.
Okay, this is a 4.
Let me clear here. Yeah, so essentially it's about the same, but yours is a shorter version. So mine is a tall, long one. Yours, that will work just fine too.
Sounds good.
The numbers, really, it's kind of arbitrary sometimes, but they're all somewhat universal. So 800s are always going to be an 800, but a 400 one might be the same hole diameter, but the length of the tip might be different. Cool. So I have my cream puffs here. This was on the bottom rack of mine, so I can kind of see it got a little darker on the bottom, but they still feel really light. You can kind of see some of mine didn't turn out as nice. It kind of puffed up and then it went sideways. But I think they're still going to turn out really nice. So I'm just going to take mine off my rack, or put them off my pan and put them onto my cooler rack. If you have a room that's a little cooler, or a fan or something, the cooler that these kind of come, or the closer they come to like being cool, the sooner you can fill them. Because if your eclairs or your puff pastry, or not puff pastry, your pot au choux is too hot, it will melt your pastry cream, and then you have this kind of really not pleasant gooey mess going on. So I'm just gonna fan mine for a little bit. I wouldn't refrigerate it to cool it down faster. That will kind of get them soggy. So just let them kind of come to temp. How's everybody's looking? Let me cancel my spotlight so I can see other people's cameras.
Here's ours. If I can get the thing over there.
Yeah, those are looking good.
Mine, it's the height that I was expecting it to be puffier.
Yeah. Yeah, that didn't rise as much, but I think they'll still turn out pretty nicely, Cindy. Essentially, when you're piping it onto the strip, onto your parchment, if you do it too wide, then they kind of rise a little bit. But if you kind of do it in like one fat line, it'll rise a little higher. But yeah.
Like the
Yeah.
cream puff without fine, but
Yeah.
Don't laugh, everybody.
Oh,
Did not
yeah, they
come
didn't.
out.
They didn't rise
That's
up.
right. We're gonna make a deconstructed one. We'll wow you all in a couple of minutes.
Nice. So I can show you the difference. If you remember at the beginning, spotlight this. I was showing you when you like pull it back when you're piping it. If you pull it back really fast, this is kind of how it looks. So you get this nice little curve. And when I pulled it back too slow and I had too much on there, it was like that. So you can see the difference here. You get that texture a little bit, but it just doesn't. When you coat it in your chocolate, it won't look as nice because you have this big bump. So.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, those are looking good. Yeah.
How long should we keep the cream in the fridge? Because I'm a few minutes behind.
You're gonna want to make sure it's cool. It depends on how thick and shallow your bowl is. So if you have it in, like, if you put it in a glass, it's gonna take a lot longer. If you put it in like a sheet pan and then put it on there, then that will go quicker. But I just have mine in a bowl. It'll probably take about 30 minutes just to cool down. We want to make sure it's nice and cold. And we all want to make sure that our cream puffs and our eclairs are room temperature. We don't want them to be too warm because then it'll melt our cream. So it's one of those things where now we have to be a little patient looking at all of our delicious things here. I know we're at like an hour and a half now. But we're getting there. We're just in a waiting game now. And start a little bit of our prep for our ganache. So I'll show you what that looks like. It's one of those things that people don't realize how easy it is. So I just have a bowl here. I have this is just semi-sweet chocolate chip. You can literally use whatever kind of chocolate you like. If you like dark chocolate, use dark chocolate. If you like milk chocolate, if you have a bar of chocolate that you want to use up, use that. It really doesn't matter too much. This bag is 12 ounces and we'll need about 4 ounces or so. So I know I need about a third of the bag. I could get my scale out and all of that, but I don't feel like doing it. So I'm just gonna go about a third of the bag. So that's gonna just kind of sit right here. For our ganache, I'm just taking a small pot here, or small little saucepan. And I'm going to measure out a half a cup of heavy cream. Just a heavy whipping cream. I'm a little half cup measure here.
Did you say about 4 ounces of chocolate chip?
Yes, yes I did. So about 4 ounces.
How much cream?
It is half a cup. So that's just in a pot. This is in a little bowl next to it. We're gonna put this on the stove. I'm not doing it quite yet because we want our ganache to be like really nice and smooth and liquidy, so we can dip them in there. And we don't want to like have to reheat this or anything. So I'm just gonna set it there for the moment. I was just kind of getting that ready because the ganache only takes, wrong camera. The ganache only takes like a couple minutes, so. Same thing, I'm just gonna get some stuff prepped. So I have my other piping bag here. I'm gonna get my other tip wherever I put it. Yeah. So I'm gonna put here and just kind of get that all ready. So again, I just put my piping tip in. up to the edge where, so I know I'm gonna need it to be there. So I'm just gonna scoot that down a little. Then same process for this. So if you want to take your same glass, so I just have my glass here, putting that in there. Okay, so yeah, I'm just going to push this down a little bit. This is the same method I used for the pastry dough recipe, or the dough when we did it earlier. But I'll put the pastry cream into this so we can pipe it easier. So exact same thing. It makes piping a lot easier, so you can put it in there and have something to scrape it down on. If you're just doing it yourself, you do the same thing. I would just use my hand, kind of cupped like that, and then you have it, and you can kind of squeeze it. So where I put my spatula. So when I would put stuff, I can just put it in, then use my hand to squeeze it and do like that. But we don't need it quite yet. So I'm just getting everything ready for when the finale of putting everything together is. So my eclairs are feeling pretty good. My pastry cream is still fairly warm. Just for sake of this, I'm going to give it a quick stir just to kind of get some of the cooler bits mixed in. Not that crucial that you do this, but just so I can show you what it all looks like.
Why is this?
Yeah, so I'm just, let me switch cameras. So here's mine. I'm just giving it a quick little stir to kind of get some of the cooler bits mixed in with the warmer bits so it cools down a little quicker. If I was trying to do this as rapidly as possible, I would get like a sheet pan or something and put it on that, because then it will cool really rapidly. Tastes really good. Just too warm still.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Even out? No.
Cool. All right. So we're nearing the end. We're just trying to wait for our pastry cream to cool down. But essentially what we'll do is, if you have like a toothpick or a skewer, that will work. We can go ahead and start doing this to some of ours. So I just have my cream puff here. I'm just going to kind of poke a hole into it, big enough for my tip. So you can kind of see here that already had a little bit of a hole. But this is why we want it to be hollow, so we have this nice little hole in there. So see here, so this one is kind of still like that. I'm just going to kind of go and like make a little hole for my piping tip to go through. If you did this with your piping tip, it can kind of clog it and then make it difficult to pipe in there later. And you also don't want it to be so big that your cream leaks out at the end. So just going through, making some holes in at the bottom. And for your eclairs, you're going to do the same thing, but you're going to want to do like maybe 2 of them, 2 holes, so you get the whole thing filled. So I'm going to do like 1 on each side. And then when I put the tip in, I'll kind of direct it each direction. All right, so all mine have little holes in them. All right, so I'm going to get my ganache started because it'll take a few. So I'm just taking the heavy cream that I put in here earlier, which was 1/2 cup, and I'm just going to put it on medium-high heat and let that come. Similar to how we did before, we don't want it to like be a rolling boil. We want it to just kind of be hot enough where essentially it's going to melt our chocolate chips. So that's just kind of come up to 10. Gonna put other stuff away that I'm not using anymore. Since I only have about 1/2 cup in here, it's going to go fairly quickly. It should only take a couple minutes to kind of come up to temp. Just that little spatula here that make sure nothing burns.
Kevin, earlier you used the verb dip, I think.
Yep.
Are these going to be dipped or can we spread them?
You can do whatever you want. I'm going to dip mine, so I'm just going to kind of flip them upside down into the chocolate. But you can take a spoon and spoon it over the top of them too, that's fine. Or if you're having a deconstructed eclairs or stuff, you can very decoratively put it on your plate.
You know, I had an idea about that. She could make like, just take 2 thin ones and make like a Eclair sandwich.
Yep.
Oh yes, we've discussed several possibilities.
That's what I thought we were supposed to be doing, and so I made the first 2 rows very thin, and now we're realizing that that's not what we're gonna do. We might experiment.
Yeah. You can actually take that same dough, and if you're brave and you want to make churros, you can take a thing of hot oil and you pipe them directly into the hot oil and cut it, so you're not like trying to push it on anything. And that's how you make churros, and you take them out and toss them in cinnamon sugar. So
Okay, I'm in for that class.
exact same thing. Maybe we can do that in a couple weeks, so your mind is still on how to shoot. So you can see here, mine's pretty much up to temp. Give it another 10 seconds or so. Switch over to this one. Oh, you can see here mine's steaming, which is what we want. And we're going to pour it on the chocolate and leave it. Don't stir it right now. Leave it alone. Just let it sit for a good minute. Your first thought and your first thing you want to do is just like get in there and start stirring it. Just be patient. Just wait.
So at what point does the heavy cream need to be when we put it in there? Boiling or just bubbling?
Just before boiling. You don't want it to be bubbling too much. If it starts getting there, then you take it off. Well, when you're boiling or when you are doing milk or cream or anything like that and it starts to boil, you start burning the fat that's in there, and then you start getting a kind of a burned or a charred taste. Even though it may not like discolor, you can kind of get that. So whenever you're doing like heating up milks or creams, you want to get it right before it starts like bubbling, and then you're in a good spot. All right, so our mixture has been sitting for about a minute or so. So I just have a spatula here. So I'm just going to start stirring it. It may seem kind of thin at first, but once the chocolate starts getting in, all mixed in, it will change pretty rapidly. Switch to a spoon because that spatula is too big. So I see that coloring just start to get that really nice glossy brown chocolatey color. I'm going to get my spatula again to get the edges. If you just had a small spatula, which I should have used to begin with, and you wouldn't have had to switch back and forth. I'm just getting all the edges here. And that's it. That's chocolate ganache. It should be pretty nice and glossy. You have that really nice shine on it, so if you can kind of see in the light, it reflects pretty well. You want it to be really glossy and shiny. That makes it look really pretty when you're done. It should be fairly liquidy. You don't want it to be, it shouldn't be thick at all. Like a pudding, it shouldn't be that thick. I mean, it's thick, but it still pours pretty nice. You can kind of see it coming down pretty easily. So that's exactly what we want. So I'm just going to set that to the side, and I'm going to grab my pastry cream out of the fridge. All right, so I have my pastry cream here. All right. So I'm going to put this into my piping bag. It's just in that bowl, the glass like I had before. I'm going to grab a spoon for this one. Kind of a spoon spatula thing. So mine's still a little warm, but it's pretty good. So you want it to be a little thicker than this, and once it cools down, it will be. So maybe I should wait, but I don't want you guys to all have to just wait for mine to cool if yours is ready. I have nothing here right now because I'm pretty sure it's going to run out too soon. Yeah, so you can see mine's just kind of coming out of the bag, so I know mine's too thin right now. It still tastes good, but it's too thin, so I'm not gonna take some.
Kevin, couldn't you have set that bowl in a bowl of ice?
Yep, that's what I'm gonna do to cool it down because it's still too hot and I don't want everybody to have to wait. So, she is exactly right. So I'm just taking a bigger bowl and I'm gonna fill it up with ice and water. I'm gonna mute myself real quick because it's a metal bowl and the ice is gonna.
Kevin, did you determine yours was too warm by its texture, or it's like, did you hover your hand over it and you can actually feel warmth? Because my saran wrap feels cool to the touch.
If your saran wrap feels cool to the touch, then it's probably okay. It should be like a thick pudding. So you can see here, mine is still like just under room temperature.
Okay, so if mine jiggles like that.
Yours is probably good then.
Okay.
It should be thick. It shouldn't be like if you put it in your piping bag, it shouldn't like just drip out.
Kev, we put ours in the freezer.
Yeah, you can do that.
Was that okay?
Just I wouldn't store it in there, but yeah, I think it's okay for now. So I just have a bowl of ice. I'm gonna add a little bit of salt to essentially lower the freezing point. Just makes it colder. A little salt and then some water. So this is just a bowl of some salt water. I'm going to put this in there, make sure it doesn't get into your liquid. I'll push it down as much as I can.
You know, I would sooner make whipped cream out of it. I think it can curdle.
So there's that. And I'm just going to stir it and it will cool down pretty rapidly.
I think I want to refill it a few times so it doesn't get too warm.
You can make the pastry cream like a day or so ahead of time if you wanted to, so you don't have to like have everything right here and there.
Like it could really last in the refrigerator for a day or two at our house.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, oh, there's a piping bag of pastry cream, and like you just like walk by and grab it and squirt it in your mouth and keep going.
Yep.
So I'm just trying to maximize the surface on the cold, so it just makes it a little, kind of drops the temp.
Yeah. Yes? Rick?
Cindy.
What? What? What?
Much colder.
Where are you? Rick?
Mom, you're not muted.
Okay, your dad is calling me on the phone and I don't know. Oh, there, I see him now. Maybe the bear's out there. Oh my God, there's a moose right there. Hang on, I gotta switch you guys around.
Oh,
How do I do that?
I'm just stirring, so let's see what.
Maximize mom's screen.
Hold on, how do I flip the screen around?
Just. Yeah.
You see him?
Holy shit! Aim up a little, Mom. Aim up. Aim up. Oh, there he goes.
Oh my gosh.
That was incredible.
That was huge. He was so close.
Thank you, Mom, for showing us.
That was Dad. He was outside. Okay, I gotta go look at Moose. Sorry.
Here's Spotify. No more moose. So I'm still stirring. is taking longer than I thought this whole session, so I apologize and thank you for sticking around. 'Cause,
It looks like it's starting to thicken a little.
yep, it's getting there.
So this is my attempt at a deconstructed one. Oh, my things are sliding. My garnish. Oop.
Can you show us one more time? I just put you on.
Everything like almost fell out. Here, I'm just gonna like hold it like this.
Nice.
So
Just have little chocolate cookies and dipping it in some, or I say puff pastry, pastry cream. I'm sure it still probably tastes pretty good.
Or actually get another crayon.
All right. It's getting there. Again, this is one of those things that it can take a while to cool, so you want it to be cold. If not, you'll have runny cream puffs and eclairs. Almost.
I did do some.
All right. How's that? All right. Starting to feel a little cold now. So I'm going to do the same thing we did before. My piping bag stretched out. It's a little gross now because I already had stuff in there, but still okay. Still think mine's a little thin, but I think it'll work okay for at least demonstrating, and then I can let everybody go to finish theirs once their pastry cream is fully cooled. Yeah, so mine's still a little runny, but it'll work for demonstration purposes. Oh. Just have my pan here, and I have my my eclair. So I'm just going to find the little hole that I had in before, and I'm just going to squeeze it into there. You should be able to feel it kind of get heavier. So I got a little too much in there. You can see it's starting to kind of ooze out. So I'm just going to take.
I'll eat that one.
So I'm just going to take a knife and just kind of scrape it off into the bowl.
Oh yeah. Yep.
So it looks like that.
I'm able to do at least 5, 6 eclairs like that.
And I have my ganache here. So I'm just going to give that a good stir so it's good. And then I'm just going to dip it in there like that. You don't have to do a lot. Just kind of let the tips come off and move that over and then flip it over like that. You have a nice little clear. Let me see if I can move this camera and show you from the side how it looks. Oh, wrong button. Let's do another one. So I have this here. Have my piping bag, and I'm just going to kind of stick it in the hole there and just squeeze softly. I can see there's a little bit of a hole on that side, so it's coming out. And this one's squirting out all over the place.
I'll eat that one too.
Let's do a cream puff this time. So I have that. So I'm just going to stick that down into there.
Great. You got all of it.
This one didn't squeeze out too much. I think I can get a little bit more pastry cream into it. So I'm just gonna. Oh, it's pretty good right up to the top. Then I'm gonna take my ganache, just dip it in there. And then I'm just gonna kind of leave it hovering for a second to get all the chocolate to come off. And once it's kind of stable, then you can flip it over. I just kind of give it a twirl, and then you have your nice cream puff. Okay. So that's
I like that we made a bunch of little ones though. Yeah, me too.
how they work.
I prefer for an eclair, honestly. Yeah. Love it.
Yeah, so again, my pastry cream's still pretty thin. If you get yours and it's like all the way cool and you're like,
You need to make the holes bigger.
this is still really thin. If your pastry cream is cold and it's still really thin, what you can do is make whipped cream. So just take some of your heavy whipping cream and just whip it up until it's nice and fluffy, and then mix it into your pastry cream, and then you get this kind of nice
That one?
thick.
Or is that one good?
I'm gonna mute it. So yeah, so mine is gonna thicken up eventually, but maybe turn it back down. That's kind of how they look. So you get that nice shiny, lovely coat on them.
Those
So,
are ridiculously beautiful. They're so lovely.
I'm sorry you guys didn't turn out as nicely. It's,
Oh, but they tasted delicious. So
great. Cool. So that's it. You're just going to kind of repeat the process for all of them once your pastry cream is cooled. And so I don't want to like keep everybody for much longer because it's already been longer than I thought it was going to be. Yeah, just make sure your pastry cream is cool. Put it in your bag and pipe it into the little holes that you made. Does anybody have questions? I'm going to definitely be around finishing mine up, so I'll let people go from here. But if you have questions, feel free to call or text or FaceTime or anything like that. I'm happy to help answer questions, but it's just waiting for the pastry cream and then doing the same thing that we just did.
thank you so much, Kevin.
So,
Hey, Kev,
yeah.
I've got like tons of the ganache left. What can I do with it?
I mean, again, it's kind of like a pudding. It depends on what you have around. If you want to make more stuff, you can. You can, again, just eat it by itself. It's pretty good by itself. If you have cake or you want to make cupcakes, you can fill cupcakes with it. It's kind of one of those.
Not the pudding, the chocolate stuff.
Oh, the chocolate?
Oh, I can eat that by the pudding by itself.
Yeah, the chocolate ganache, it's you can put it in the fridge and then use it for kind of anything else that you want to put it on. Chocolate ganache is good on pretty much anything you put chocolate on. So if you have like some fruit, some strawberries or berries, it's really good on it. Cakes or anything that you would normally put chocolate on, you can put some ganache on. So it keeps pretty nicely in the fridge for a week or so. Probably a little longer since it's heavy cream. So I would just kind of put it in and eat it as you'd like. It'll get a little thicker, so you can just microwave it to get it thinned up. Or you can have like kind of a nice thick bits. If you cool it down and it kind of gets to be really kind of stiff, you can get like a melon baller and scoop it up, and then you kind of have like chocolate truffles. And you like roll them into little balls, and you can toss them in cocoa powder or powdered sugar or lots of different things. That's perfect.
Kevin, what's your Venmo?
Oh, my Venmo is Kevin_Monk. You like? That's always helpful. Thanks for the reminder.
What a mess. Oh, we made a mess, Kev.
Yep, I have a decent mess here as well, so.
It was fun though, but boy, am I a mess.
Thank you.
All right, well, I'm gonna try the pastry again. Always came out flat, but I don't think we piped enough on there.
Okay. Yeah, it's one of those things that you might have to try another time, like just to make sure you get enough, but it's a fairly quick and easy dough to make. Yeah. It's not super intensive, so.
Okay, is there anywhere you can compile the recipes? so
Yeah.
that
Come back.
like a little book you want to sell,
Yeah, I
start a
can.
notebook or something, because I want to go back and make some of this, but I don't have
Sure.
recipes.
Yeah, I have pretty much everything in a Google Drive right now. So it's just a bunch of different documents. So I can open that up and share it with everybody. So you can go in and just click on it and get the recipe.
Kevin, you're talking to your mother. I don't know how to do that.
I'll take care of it.
Okay, thank you.
I'll take care of it.
You're talking about your mother who has absolutely. Whoops.
All right.
This out.
I'm gonna finish mine up and I'll take some pictures once everybody has theirs or what they're happy with. Send some pictures. I'd love to see how everybody's turns out. Again, I'm gonna be doing this for the next probably 30 minutes or so. But if you're working on it tonight or anytime, feel free to drop me a text message or call me or whatever. Happy to help out.
All righty. Thanks, babe. Bye.
Bye, Joyce.
Bye.